Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome both to those zooming in from home or office, as well as the group that's gathered for live stream in the Mars building. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sheila McElwraith. I'm a professor in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Toronto, a Canada CFAR AI chair at the Vector Institute, and also associate director at the Schwartz Reisman Institute for Technology and Society. Before we begin today, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, Toronto has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit. These and other Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island developed complex and effective governance systems based on respect for all life and the intelligence of the natural world. Today, this land is still home to many Indigenous people who are working to reclaim their rights to self-determination and self-governance, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and to work on this land. Although we may all be joining from different places today, we encourage you to reflect on the history and the relations of the land that you live and work on. Before I introduce Milind, I wanted to mention a couple of logistic items. This session, of course, is being recorded, so please be cognizant of that. I also wanted to mention that Milind will speak for approximately 50 minutes, and he'll pause for questions around the midpoint. There will also be a Q&A after his presentation, and we'll be using Zoom raise hands function to order questions both in the pause and at the end of his talk. So now it gives me tremendous pleasure to introduce Milind Tambe, Gordon McKay Professor of Computer Science and Director of the Center for Research in Computation and Society at Harvard University, and also Principal Scientist and Director for AI for Social Good at Google Research. Milind's research focuses on advancing AI and multi-agent systems for public health, conservation, and public safety, with a track record of building pioneering AI systems for social impact. He's a recipient of a number of awards and honors, including the H. John McCarthy Award, the AMAS ACM Autonomous Agent Research Award, and the AAAI Robert S. Englemore Memorial Lecture. For those of you outside computer science, let me add that these are some of the most prestigious awards, both for his research, but also for his service to the AI community. And so these are really wonderful awards for him to have won. Additionally, for his work on AI and public safety, Milind has received the Columbus Fellowship Foundation Homeland Security Award, and he's also received commendations and certificates of appreciation from the U.S. Coast Guard, the Federal Air Marshal Service, and Airport Police at the City of Los Angeles. I could go on, but I'm not going to. But the last thing I did want to say, and I guess this is a personal comment, that Milind has really committed his research career to harnessing the power of machine learning and AI to address really critical problems whose resolution truly improves the world. His work and its goals are really something that I find inspiring. So with that, please join me in welcoming Milind Tambe. Milind, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for this very kind introduction. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for inviting me. And let me now share my screen. So I'm going to talk to you today about AI for social impact. So for the past 15 years, my team and I have been advancing AI and multi-agent systems for social impact, focusing on topics of public health, conservation, and public safety and security. Key goal is how to optimize our limited intervention resources. So as you listen to this lecture, there's three key lessons, three key points you can take away. First, I'll highlight some of the lessons we've learned in AI for social impact, and perhaps those would be useful. Secondly, the steps that we've followed in taking AI systems to social impact would hopefully be useful. And finally, for those of you who may be researchers in AI or computation systems, the work may reveal some challenges for basic AI research. So I mentioned lessons, so let me start with lesson number one here. Achieving social impact and AI innovation go hand in hand. So when we talk about AI for social impact, it doesn't just mean taking very known AI solutions and applying them out of the box for a social problem. Consider challenges in public health. We have large populations to serve a limited number of public health resources. A concrete example is work we've done with youth experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles. Harnessing the social networks of these youth, we are able to show that our AI solutions are far more effective in spreading HIV information and reducing HIV risk behaviors compared to traditional approaches. But this work required innovation in the area of social network influence maximization algorithms, because the social network itself is not known to us ahead of time. So with respect to public safety, we've contributed a new model called Stackelberg Security Games and contributed new algorithms that have been in use by the Coast Guard, the Federal Air Marshals, and others. And have, in an independent publication, been credited with saving $100 million to the US government agencies. So these may seem like very different application areas, but what ties them together is the fact that underlying research that's happening here is all based on multi-agent systems. A second lesson is all of this work requires deep partnerships with communities, with nonprofits, and government. And our ultimate goal is to avoid being gatekeepers to AI technology for social impact. A third lesson is that the entire data to deployment pipeline is important when we talk about AI for social impact. In this work, we often start with immersing ourselves in the domain, trying to understand the kind of data that are available, the kind of problems faced by a nonprofit. Following that, a predictive model makes predictions on which of the cases faced by a nonprofit may be low risk or high risk. And following that, a prescriptive algorithm makes recommendations on which cases to actually intervene on, since we cannot intervene on all of the high-risk cases. And finally, field testing and deployment is crucial because social impact itself is a key objective. If we are talking about AI for social impact and there is no actual social impact, then it is not AI for social impact. The point here is that this entire pipeline is important. AI for social impact is not confined to just improving the AI algorithms. So with that introduction, I'm going to go into an outline for this talk. There are 4 projects I'll cover. In each project, 3 in public health, 1 in conservation. In each project, there is a particular AI technique and an application domain. One of the first project comes from Google Research India, where this was done. The other 3 are things we are doing at Harvard. I'll cover papers for 5 years, for the past 5 years that have appeared in AI conferences like AAAI, NHCI, and NeurIPS, and so forth. I'll focus on real world results in this talk mostly. There are more simulations with synthetic data sets and so forth that are in our papers if there's interest. I'll also highlight the role of the lead PhD student or postdoc by putting up their picture in the top right-hand corner of the slide on which their work is shown. So let's start with maternal and child care as the first topic. So the motivation here is the United Nations Sustainable Development Target that by 2030, the maternal mortality ratio, mothers dying during childbirth or soon after, goes below 70 per 100,000 live births. So that is the United Nations target. Where we are today, Western Europe, much lower, United States is growing, but still much below the UN target. But in the developing world, while the rates are falling, for example, in India, the numbers are still higher than 100, and that's where we will focus our work today. So what that has translated into is that a woman dies in childbirth every 20 minutes in India. 4 out of 10 children end up being too thin or short. And so we are very fortunate to be working with a nonprofit called Arman that works with 26 million beneficiaries or mothers in India. It's active in 19 states in India. And we are very inspired by the founder of Arman, Dr. Hegde, Aparna Hegde. On her website, for example, you find this as part of her lecture that she gave earlier, this quote that pregnancy is not a disease, childhood is not an ailment, dying due to a natural life event is not acceptable. So we were very inspired by this and I wanted to figure out a way to work together. We met in Mumbai in 2019 summer, but then question is, what can we do with AI? So after some discussion, we arrived at this particular problem they face in their mobile health program of adherence. So they have this M-Mitra mobile health program, which delivers an automated 2-minute voice message to mothers who enroll in the program. It's in the local language, and it's something like, okay, you're 3 months into your pregnancy, you should use a certain health supplement, or your baby is 3 weeks old, get the baby vaccinated. From the time the mother enrolls to the time the baby is 1 year old, there is 141 automated voice messages that get delivered. And this program has shown significant benefits in randomized control trials to the health of the mother and the baby. But, and in fact, 2 million mothers have so far enrolled in this program. So where do we come in? Unfortunately, whereas after enrolling, 30 to 40% mothers may become low listeners or drop out entirely from the program. To understand why they may do so, we were again fortunate that Arman took us around to the sites they work at, in the hospitals where they enroll these mothers, in the localities where these families live. I've grown up in Mumbai. I know some of these localities, but going in the homes of these mothers of these families who are, well below the international poverty line was really eye-opening. I certainly couldn't sleep and came away with great admiration for the social workers and the nonprofits who operate in these communities. So the question now is, what can we do in order to improve adherence so that more mothers could benefit from the health messages that are given out? Now, Arman has this call center from where they can send they can make a live call to these mothers to motivate them to remain adherent to listening to these messages. But the call center can't call all of the mothers. So who can they call? So here's the problem from an AI perspective. We have 100,000 mothers who are enrolled in the program at a particular time. So all 100,000 are getting these automated voice messages every week. We have to choose 1,000 of these mothers to give a live service call to, so that we maximize the health messages that are getting listened to. So here's a health worker. In this case, just for illustration, I'm showing she has 5 mothers under her care. 4 of them, shown in red, have not listened to an automated voice message. 1 of them, shown in green, has. And she has to choose to give a live service call to 2 of them, in this case, so as to encourage them to listen to these voice messages. In this case, she chooses the first 2, and those 2 turn to green. So that's a good choice. Another one turns to green. Now she has 2 mothers left in red, and she has to decide now who she would call. So if she calls those who are in red at this point, this turns out to be, however, a bad choice, because not only those 2 who are in red remain red, but 2 others who are in green also become red. The point here is that a service call may not change a beneficiary state. A beneficiary may change state on their own, and yet we have to prioritize 1,000 beneficiaries every week. So to solve this problem, we cast it as a restless bandit to pull K out of N arms per week. So for those who may not be familiar with what's a restless bandit, this is a model where each mother is modeled as a Markov decision problem. Each mother can be in a bad state where she has not listened to a voice message, or a good state. She has listened to this automated voice message, this health message. We can take an action to intervene, to give her a service call, or not intervene, not give her a service call. And then we have a transition matrix that governs, that's trying to model the behavior of the mother. So if there is no intervention, the probability that the mother remains in a bad state remains 0.8. So bad to bad is 0.8. But if we give this mother a service call, then the probability that she remains in a bad state, drops to 0.2. So there's a higher probability that the mother will shift to a good state. Now, in reality, of course, we have 100,000 mothers. So that means we have 100,000 these arms, 100,000 of these Markov decision problems. And we have to choose 1,000. So that's 100,000 choose 1,000 that we know is a very difficult problem to solve. One way to solve this is what's called the Whittle index. So if we can compute a Whittle index for each beneficiary, that gives us a ranking of these mothers. The Whittle index essentially is computing the benefit of intervention. Who would benefit the most? And if we can rank all of the mothers and then take the top 1,000, that's what we want. More formally, for the computer scientists in the audience, a Whittle index is a subsidy that we could give to the passive action, that is non-intervention actions, such that the Q value of the passive and intervention actions become the same. So this is the minimum such subsidy we can give. There's no out-of-the-box algorithm to compute a Whittle index. Fortunately, we had developed such an algorithm in Chen et al. 2016 Amos paper, so we could use it for this purpose. Now, this Whittle index, however, requires that we know all of the model parameters, the transition probabilities and so forth. In reality, we don't know these model parameters. We don't know the behaviors of the mothers. What we do know is in the past, how mothers have acted. So when the mothers are registered, Armand collects from the mothers features, that is age, income, education level, etc. And from monitoring the listening behaviors of these mothers, they have data on the engagement sequence. The mother was not engaging, and then there was a service call, and she remained not engaging. That is bad state, service call, bad state, or bad state, service call, good state. Now, the interesting point here is there's not that many service calls made compared to the number of mothers. So we have limited amount of active transition probability data. And this is one of the lessons here, is that the lack of data and uncertainty is going to be a key feature of AI for social impact, as you'll see throughout this talk. What we do have, though, is data from a lot of these mothers. And so we can harness that to do clustering, and this clustering will compensate for lack of data, and clustering also speeds up the Whittle index computation. So we are going to cluster all of these mothers and then learn a mapping from the features, age, income, etc., to the center of the clusters. That is to say, when a new mother walks in with a certain age, income level, we can predict what cluster she belongs to. That cluster gives us the probability of transition that that mother has, the kinds of behaviors that she'll display. That's our prediction. From that, we can now compute the Whittle indices, which gives us the ranking, and then call the top 1,000 mothers. So we ran a field study first with 23,000 mothers, beneficiaries. It's the first large-scale application, as far as we know, of restless multi-arm bandits for public health. There's 7,667 beneficiaries. We divided them into 3 groups of 7,667 each. One was the restless bandit group, one was the round robin group, and the third was this current standard of care group. We gave them 225 calls per week for 7 weeks. That's pulling 225 of these arms. In the restless bandit group, the 225 called were the ones with the top Whittle indices. In the round robin group, we call the first 225, then the next 225, etc. In the current standard of care group, there is no call going out. This is no intervention at all. And now we want to see how many more health messages were listened to over the current standard of care group in each of the 2 remaining groups. And here's what we find. This is on the x-axis, different weeks, and on the y-axis, cumulatively, how many more messages were listened to. The blue is the restless bandit group, and we can see that 600 more messages were listened to compared to the current standard of care, whereas in the round robin group, very few more extra messages, health messages, are being listened to. In terms of statistical significance, we can see that the difference between the RMAB and current standard of care is statistically significant, but round robin to current standard of care is not statistically significant. The point here is that it is important to optimize service calls. Just doing calls in this round robin fashion does not lead to any improvement over the current standard of care. And that the restless bandit group cuts the drop-off rate from the current standard of care by 30%. So now we have many more mothers listening to these messages. So based on the work that we had done, we've now deployed this system at Arman. The system is called Saheli. I'm not going to go into details. There's an IAI paper that goes into all of that. Saheli also means a friend in Hindi. It's also an acronym. This is just to tell you that we've spent enormous amounts of time coming up with a good acronym. 100,000 beneficiaries so far have been assisted by Saheli, and we continue to assist more mothers through the system. Dr. Hegde, in this YouTube video, you'll find AI for Social Good made by a very talented team. She says about this deployed system that we are able to reach out to more and more women each week and get them back into the fold and save lives because of AI. I'm also going to play this video. Hopefully this will play of one of the beneficiaries who's interviewed in this program.
मी तो फोन नव्हते ऐकत पहिला त्याच्यानंतर मला त्या ताईंचा कॉल आला त्या घरी आल्या मला समजवलं हा कॉल घ्यायला पाहिजे तुझ्या पोरांसाठी चांगला आहे हा मग तेव्हा मी कॉल घ्यायला लागले आणि ते कॉल ऐकून खूप बरं वाटतं की कोणीतरी घरचंच मला कोणीतरी समजवायला येतंय मग जसं ते कॉल ऐकते मी तसंच मी माझ्या पोरगीचं संगोपन करते.
So this, the mother is speaking here in Marathi. This is all filmed in Mumbai. So something very satisfying because Marathi is also my mother tongue, and since I grew up in Mumbai. So we surveyed the call receivers to understand why they started listening to messages after receiving service call. We surveyed 500 of those, and 60% of them told us service calls helped them listen more. 40% said no. Among those 60%, we asked them why, and they said they got more information about the mobile health program, more than 70% of those. So this is essentially saying that doing these service calls to motivate these mothers help them to listen more. We also looked at the fairness in terms of education and income level. Now, in India, the main challenges would be one around caste and religion, but these data are not collected by the nonprofit for a variety of reasons. What we can use instead is education and income as proxies for socioeconomic marginalization. And these are all families that are way, way below the poverty line. So let's look at education. So on the x-axis are different, are they, have they graduated just, high school, or are they postgraduate, are they illiterate, have they just passed the 12th grade, etc. And on the income side, the income levels are in rupees. So this is really, the exchange rate between the US dollar and a rupee is like 1 to 80. So you can see that is fairly low incomes, monthly incomes. And now the whole population percentages are shown in orange, and the intervened populations are shown in blue. And the point being made here is that we are intervening on people who are lower on the income side more, and we are intervening more who have lower education. So in general, we are favoring people with lower education and lower income, and that's what the NGO wants. And so in that sense, the system is intervening on the right side of who to intervene on. Other questions we can ask is, could there be a simpler alternative to using this Whittle index? So given all of the data that we've collected, we constructed a simulator. In the simulator, we ran the Whittle index policy, a greedy policy, a random policy, etc. We repeated the same experiment in simulation, and we are able to show that the Whittle index policy would lead to more improvement compared to a greedy policy. So this is using the exact data that we had collected in the previous experiment. Let me now turn to some of the next steps that we are taking. And after this is done, I'm going to take a short break and take a few questions. So first is what we call decision-focused learning. Now, as I've said, there's this data to deployment pipeline where we start with the data, then there's a machine learning component that comes in to make predictions given features of these mothers, age, income, etc., predict their behavior, their transition probabilities. And then there's this optimization component that picks the top K beneficiaries to call. So there is the two stages, maximize learning. So we want to maximize learning accuracy to get our learning to be as accurate as possible to model the behaviors of mothers. And then we want to have our optimization to maximize decision quality. However, maximizing learning accuracy does not lead to maximizing decision quality. And so why might this happen? In fact, in a real world experiment, we can see this is happening. If we look at, these are two data sets. If you look at which data set would be more accurate in terms of predicting behavior, the orange data set, we were much more accurate in predicting behaviors of the mothers. But when we called these mothers using our service call approach, what we find is that in data set 2, which has lower predictive accuracy, we actually were able to improve engagement much more. So to understand this, let's take this simple illustrative example where imagine there's some feature that we have of the mother. In this case, let's suppose it's income or something like that. And then we have transition probabilities that are plotted. This is just a simple illustrative idealized example. There's a lot of blue mothers who are low risk, and there's a few beneficiaries who are shown in red who are high risk. So anything to the left of the orange line is low risk, to the right is high risk. And if we now say, let's, using a linear regressor, learn to predict the behaviors of these mothers, the green line is learned, which has a high learning accuracy in terms of making accurate predictions, but in terms of decision quality is low because it misses all the high risk beneficiaries. Decision-focused learning modifies the loss function of learning to directly maximize decision quality rather than learning accuracy. Now it learns this green regressor line, which is low learning accuracy. It's not going to do a good job of predicting these low-risk mothers for sure, but it gets to the high-risk mothers and has a higher decision quality. So this decision-focused learning, for those of you who may be computer scientists, is taking gradients back all the way from the actual solution that we want in terms of decision quality. And we've now deployed this. We've done an experiment with 9,000 beneficiaries here, divided into 3 groups. In terms of predictive accuracy, so we have a 2-stage group and a decision-focused group. We can see that decision-focused group has a lower predictive accuracy. But then if you look at after calling them for several weeks and seeing who had more messages listened to, we find that the decision-focused learning group, which has a lower predictive accuracy because it is really focused on improving the actual behaviors, listening behaviors of the mothers, it leads to higher decision quality, it leads to higher deployment performance, more messages are being listened to. And so this is what we are currently deploying now with our MAN. There are lots of other very interesting research challenges. Instead of predicting a point probability, we can imagine we predict a transition probability interval uncertainty. So we say, instead of saying it's 0.3, it might be a interval range of 0.4 to 0.7 as the transition probability between a bad state and good state, or 0.2 to 0.4 between a good state and bad state. So now we have to choose a policy that what we'll say is trying to minimize maximum regret. So we're going to play a zero-sum game against nature. We are trying to choose an arm ranking 1 to 1,000 that will lead to highest decision quality. But nature is going to choose these probabilities within these intervals to cause our ranking to perform as worse as possible. So we have to come up with a policy to choose arms, the rankings, such that we minimize the maximum regret possible, no matter what nature does. So this is trying to assume that nature is trying to do the worst against us, and we are trying to be as robust as possible against that. So this is one area of work that we've been pushing. I'm going to skip over some of the details here because I noticed that we are a little bit slower than what I had hoped for. But there are many other applications of the same technique of restless bandit. One of them is adherence monitoring for preventing tuberculosis. So for tuberculosis is also a massive disease. It's kills 500,000 Indians a year. It's 3 million infected in India. It's, of course, a global disease, #2 killer, only #2 to COVID right now around the globe. And here, patients are supposed to take treatment pills for 6 months. I get tired if I'm asked to take a course for 7 days. Here, to take 6 months, people drop off treatment. And then the question is, how can you keep them motivated to keep taking these pills? And so again, we have these health workers who are tasked with, from a call center, calling these patients to keep, motivating them. So imagine this health worker, hundreds of patients under her care, choosing 3 patients to call today. And when she calls, she finds out that 2 of them took their medicines last night, 1 of them hadn't. She motivates them to keep taking their medicine. Now she has to say, okay, who do I call tomorrow? And she chooses these 3. So you can see this choice of who to call day after day is very similar to the problem I mentioned earlier, except that the state of the patient, whether they've taken their medicine or not, is not known. And so we can solve this problem. We've proposed a solution to this problem where we model each mother as what's called a POMDP, a partially observable Markov decision problem, and provided a solution. But there are many other applications, and I wanted to sketch out some that we're pursuing. Within Arman itself, our goal is to go to 1 million beneficiaries. That's 10 times the size of where we are. And we are hopefully on track to do this in 2023. There's another program of Government of India, which is 10 times larger than Arman. Very similar. Basic idea is get health messages out to mothers, expecting mothers. And here, I mean, the size of the program is massive. It's India-wide. When they talk about 5.28 crore, that's like 52 million audio messages being sent out. And so we have now begun work on this program. And so that's something very exciting. We're also working with Cushy Baby, which is another nonprofit focused on preventing malnutrition. Our Ichkai 22 paper looks at working with Help Mom, which is an NGO in Nigeria. This is a simulation effort we showed about improving vaccination rates. So there's lots of possibilities for applying the kinds of restless bandit approach in many different applications. So I'm going to stop here before I go on to the next topic and take a couple of questions.
Let me just encourage people, if they have questions, to please raise their hands, and I'll watch in the Zoom window to see if anybody has any questions. Yeah, Abby.
Great. Now, thank you for this fascinating presentation. And as you were talking, I could see a lot of potential applications in public health globally, right? But one of the things that really worked in your situation is Arman had a lot of really good data that you could kind of use that to predict these things. What recommendations would you have for all of us who work in public health who are sometimes struggling with having access to good quality data? Where do we start? What can we do to use the AI as a friend for public health?
Fantastic question. And I should point out that data is good, comparatively speaking, but we're still struggling because there's not enough active intervention data from the past. And so we had to do this sort of clustering as a solution to try to compensate for the lack of data that we had. In the next part of the talk, you will see that we use sampling as a way of trying to compensate for lack of data. So we are always struggling to come up with newer and newer techniques. There isn't one solution out of the box that, at least in that experience, has applied across the board. But indeed, we have to continuously deal with, okay, there's a lack of data. You'll see in the last part of the presentation for coaching prevention, for example, that there's a trade-off between exploiting known data and also trying to gather new data. And so there's all these different techniques that we've had to apply for trying to gather data. So in short, I completely agree with you that lack of good data is a big hurdle in applying AI solutions, but that there are techniques perhaps within AI that can compensate for at least lack of some of this data. So we shouldn't, and in some cases, I feel that at least for researchers in AI, that's where I say the whole PhD comes in from. So whereas, so there are students who will come back to me and say, okay, there isn't good data here, so we can't use AI. And the answer is, well, that's your PhD right there, is to make AI work without that data. So that doesn't, I mean, that means that we aren't, you may need to team up with AI researchers if you're trying to apply AI solutions, but AI solutions may still be feasible.
Thank you.
So we have two more questions, and then I think we'll return to the talk. So Kalande, you're up next.
Thank you so much, Professor Tambe, for a very interesting talk. So I come from a public health background as well, and I find that the applications of artificial intelligence in my field are very exciting. So my question is around the telephone intervention that you described, and apologies if I missed this from your slides, but I was wondering if there was a difference in, if you were able to compare between the most likely to respond, the top K, and the least likely, the difference in risk for maternal and child health outcomes. And if so, is the NGO using potentially a data-driven approach to maybe develop more meaningful ways to engage those who were less likely to respond, beyond optimizing responses for those most likely to respond?
Great question. So just to be clear, the Whittle index is computing a difference between basically the benefit of intervention. So it could be that somebody is very likely to respond to the phone call to get to a good state. But even without a phone call, if they were going to go to a good state, then they would say, don't call this person because the benefit of calling is not that much. So it's really looking for that big difference coming in due to the live call. But be that as it may, your point is well taken, that this is only looking at getting people to good listening states as opposed to targeting people who may be at high risk during pregnancy. And so that's something that we have thought about so far, but we haven't yet gotten to. And it's a really good idea, but we don't have the kind of data that may be needed in order to predict pregnancy risk at this point. So good question, something we should do in the future.
So I think our third question was from our viewing room, and I'm not sure whether they seem to have lowered their hands. Maybe they want to postpone until later. The floor is yours if you want it, viewing room. Otherwise, we'll carry on. Yeah, so Milind, I'll invite you to carry on, and we'll have another opportunity for people to ask questions at the end of your talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'll try to go through some of this remaining part, each of these pieces a little bit more quickly. So the second topic is social networks for HIV prevention. So this work was done while I was in Los Angeles, right outside where my university, USC, was a camp of homeless people. And basically, in LA, there's 6,000 youth who experience homelessness every night. The rate of HIV amongst this population is 10 times the rate of the normal house population. And so having seen this camps, I wanted to see what we could do. And to that end, I found partnership in our School of Social Work there at USC, and try to bring AI techniques to assist in HIV prevention. So homeless shelters try to spread information about HIV within the homeless population by trying to select peer leaders, and then given these peer leaders, try to educate them about HIV prevention, expect these peer leaders to talk to their friends and their friends to talk to their friends, and information to spread in the social network in this way. This is real face-to-face interaction. This is not happening over Facebook, for example. And so here's a social network. Each number here is a youth experiencing homelessness. Each edge is a friendship between two youth. And we're trying to select key influencers to spread information about HIV prevention. And this is a picture from our actual work where our social work colleague is educating to youth and trying to spread this information about HIV prevention. So information is modeled as spreading in a network via this cascade. So if you educate a youth C about HIV prevention, the probability that their neighbor, their friend D will be educated about HIV prevention is 0.4 here. And if D is educated, then we assume that their friend E will get the same information with the probability of 0.4. And now there have been 2 decades of work in influence maximization in AI. However, taking known solutions and applying them in our context, 3 challenges get revealed. First, there's uncertainty in propagation probability. I said 0.4, but we may not know that. Secondly, we said we will bring in these youth, but these are youth under difficult circumstances. We try to invite somebody and they may get arrested on their way and have to send their friend. Another youth may choose to run away. So the people we invite may not be the people that actually show up. And thirdly, the social network itself is unknown. Normally, all of these algorithms assume that the social network is given as an input. All we can do is do a limited, with a limited budget, query a few of these youth and try to uncover the network. So I'm going to sketch some of the solutions that we've adopted to address these problems. So first, I said the probability of how information is propagated, this probability is not known. We can model this as sampled from some interval, from some distribution, but the mean of the distribution itself may not be known. So we may say this lies within some interval. Now we have this problem of robust influence maximization, similar to the problem I mentioned earlier, where the algorithm is trying to choose peer leaders, key influencers, to try to spread information. And we assume nature is trying to act as our adversary, trying to choose probabilities to cause our output to be as worse as possible. So it's like this zero-sum game against nature to be robust to whatever nature throws at us. A second problem I said is that the social network is not known. We can imagine that we send our social work colleagues to these homeless shelters and try to find out who's friends with whom, and after a week or 2 of hard work, come back and tell us what the social network looks like. But that's not a scalable solution. Instead, if we can query 15% of these youth, if we can go to them and say, who are your top 5 friends? And if we can do this cleverly enough in such a way that after such sampling, if we choose K peer leader nodes to spread influence, that the performance of influence spreading is similar to the optimal possible if we had known the entire network in advance. And so we have constructed such a sampling algorithm. It samples nodes randomly, estimates the sizes of the communities the nodes belongs to, and chooses seeds from the largest K communities. We can provide some formal guarantees of the performance of this algorithm, but let me come to the experiment that we did here in LA. Our system is called Change. It does network sampling, doesn't know the full social network. It has this robust policy, and it then selects peer leaders. And so we did a study with 750 youth with Professor Eric Rice in the School of Social Work at USC. 250 of these youth were in the change arm that our algorithm was treating with choosing peer leaders. 215 degree centrality, choose the most popular youth. This is the more traditional approach. We choose the most popular youth and expect them to spread influence. And control group where no influence spread is taking place at all. And now we want to know at the end of 1 month and at the end of 3 months, what was the reduction in HIV risk behaviors. We did this work with 3 homeless shelters in LA, My Friend's Place, Los Angeles LGBT Center, and Safe Place for Youth. As far as we know, first large-scale application of this influence maximization for public health. And as I said, in each of these arms, the 3 arms, we ran our algorithm to figure out who are the top influencers and chose them. In the degree centrality, the top influencers, which is the traditional approach, bring in the most popular youth. And at the end of 1 month, if you look at HIV risk behavior reduction in condomless anal sex, we can see change has more than 30% reduction. Degree centrality and control, there was no reduction. At the end of 3 months, we can see that degree centrality begins to catch up with change, but it's still not there. The point here is that change causing reduction faster is important because this is a HIV risk behavior, and also because this is a community where youth come and go, and therefore having this reduction happen faster is important. We also looked at other HIV risk behaviors like reduction in condomless vaginal sex, and again, we can see that change is better. There are statistical significance results in our Journal of AIDS and AAAI paper. Here's what our collaborator had to say about this work.
Beautiful way to kind of like marry this tech world with this social service world, like, and how we can kind of go deeper and impact young people and elevate them.
There are lots of interesting challenges to do from an AI perspective and impact perspective. Ensuring fairness. Influence spread is not uniform across different racial groups, different communities, and how to ensure there's fairness across this spread of influence. Use of reinforcement learning rather than algorithms we have come up with are two approaches that we are pursuing in this context. Let me now quickly turn to a third project on agent-based modeling for COVID-19 dynamics. So this is, this is going back, think about where we were in the spring of 2020. We collaborated with our faculty here in School of Public Health, and we did some agent-based modeling, and I wanted to share with you some of the results. In particular, this one paper in Science Advances, which often gets referred to in the media. So this is the one that I'll talk about. This is work done jointly with Professor Michael Mina, who was at the time professor in the School of Public Health at Harvard. His question to us was, again, think about where we were in spring of 2020 when the world was getting shut down. So if you wanted to test all of the students at Harvard, or at other universities, which test would you use? Would you use the PCR, the gold standard test, where it detects low viral concentration, has a high cost, but the results may come back only a day late? Or rapid tests, which requires higher viral concentration, are cheap, but we get back results in 15 minutes. The idea is you're going to test all of the students, whoever is positive, isolate them, which is the right test. And so he wanted us to do agent-based modeling simulations to figure out, to get some backing for which is the right test. So we ran these simulations, and here's what we find. If we could test all of the students every 3 days and check, isolate those who are positive, and we looked at the total number of infections, then, and in this case, if we got results back instantaneously as soon as we did the tests, we find that the rapid tests would be worse. They would lead to more infections compared to the PCR test. But because there's a one-day delay in getting back results from PCR, and certainly at the time there was, all of the advantages of this PCR, this low viral concentration test, are lost. There's far more infections because there's a one-day delay in isolating positive individuals. If because of cost, we could only run the PCR test every 5 days instead of every 3 days, again, all of the advantages of the PCR are lost. The point here is that rapid turnaround time and frequency are more critical than sensitivity for COVID-19 surveillance. So we favored rapid tests as a way of conducting this COVID-19 surveillance. This work was covered extensively in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time, etc. One day we got up and were surprised, happy that Dr. Fauci started talking about, was being interviewed about our paper. And all of the credit to Professor Mina. He's been the champion of rapid tests, and we are just glad that we could hand him some evidence with agent-based modeling to make the case for rapid tests. And today, of course, the rapid tests are more freely available, they're FDA approved, they were not before, and so forth. So again, this is just to show you some help we provided to our public health colleague in order to make the case better for these rapid tests. I'm going to spend maybe last 7-8 minutes talking about a different kind of work application in the area of conservation for poaching prevention, and then end with some lessons and take your questions. So this is work done to reduce poaching in wildlife parks. This is the Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda. These are some of my photos I took in Uganda. Beautiful wildlife there. But there's also threats to the wildlife, snares or traps that get placed by the thousands to maim and kill all of this wildlife. So rangers wander around these parks trying to find these traps and remove them. But you can see that with hundreds of rangers and thousands of square kilometers to patrol, it's extremely difficult to locate these traps. And so how can we help them? So if you can divide up the park in 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid square and give to the rangers the high risk grid squares to search in, that reduces their effort. And that's what we have done. So in the first instance that we did this work, we had 14 years of data from Uganda. So for each grid square, we have ranger patrol frequency, animal density. We know the distance to river, roads, and villages. And we have, of course, whether a snare was found in that grid square or not. So based on this, we can make predictions of finding snares in the future in each grid square. I'm going to skip over the model in the interest of time. We did a lot of tests in the lab, but they were not convincing to our colleagues in Wildlife Conservation Society or Uganda Wildlife Authority who wanted actual tests done in the field. So the first such test was done in 2016 fall. And we chose 2 areas in Queen Elizabeth National Park, which were infrequently patrolled. So we can look at the records and see that these were 2 areas. Rangers hadn't gone there for a while, or they were very infrequently patrolled. These are different. The red dots are all where snares or traps had been found in the past. We're asking these rangers to go to different areas. That's the test, basically, to convince our collaborators that AI is actually useful. And we're telling them, if you patrol these areas, you're going to find snares. Now, the rangers patrolled these areas, and they would every day, for the test was for a month, every day they would send us back an email as to what happened. This test happened a month before our AMAS conference deadline, which meant if they found snares, our students would be able to write a paper. If they didn't find snares, they would not be a paper. So you can imagine this was under a lot of pressure. And so after some time, the ranger sent an email saying that they found a poached elephant with its tusks cut off. We were too late to save this elephant, but at least the machine learning system was pointing us in the right direction. Then came news that they found a whole elephant snare roll and removed it. So poachers were active in the area. They were killing elephants, but before they could kill the next set of elephants, this elephant snare roll was removed. Then 10 antelope snares were found and removed. I had very little hope, actually, that this experiment would work. And so I had promised the students that I would buy them a drink every time a snare was found. But at the end of finding 10 antelope snares, like, okay, we can't drink anymore. So this pilot test was seen to be a success. And now it was time to do a larger scale test. So this was done in Queen Elizabeth and Murchison Falls National Parks in Uganda and Schwartz Wildlife Sanctuary in Cambodia. We selected 24 different areas, each in these parks that were infrequently patrolled. Some we designated as high risk, some we designated as low risk. The work in Uganda was with Wildlife Conservation Society, work with Cambodia was World Wildlife Fund. And then we asked rangers to patrol these areas and come back after 6 months as to what they found. And indeed, where our model predicted there was high risk of finding more snares were found. Where our model predicted there's low risk, less snares will be found, less snares were found. This is to show that we can discriminate. We're not just telling rangers, hey, this was infrequently patrolled, go there. But we can discriminate among the infrequently patrolled areas and tell them where are the high risk areas where more snares would be found. In Uganda, in Cambodia, for example, Schwartz Wildlife Sanctuary, the number of snare captures jumped 5-fold from before our pause system for making this prediction to after it was deployed. In 2021, 1,000 snares were found in March alone due to pause. And these are actual pictures from the snare captures due to pause. So this has been very exciting. Now we are at a stage, we have indeed, as a result of all of these findings, convinced our partners in wildlife conservation that pause is a useful tool, AI is a useful tool. So pause is now integrated within SMART. SMART is this software that's an output of 13 different conservation agencies collaborating. This is used by rangers worldwide to note down poaching data. So this gives us a database from which pause can operate and make predictions. And I'm glad now that pause is now available worldwide to rangers who can download the software, and we're glad that pause can assist them in the very difficult work they do to patrol and try to save wildlife across the world. So we are getting all these, we have begun these collaborations with Belize, our Zambia, with Vietnam, lots of communication. Our team was just in Belize, working with the rangers there, trying to use PAWS to make predictions for assisting them. So there's lots of different areas of work. I'm going to go through them relatively quickly here in terms of future work in this area. So far, I've only talked about the prediction phase. We also want to talk about where to patrol. And again, game theory can be used to give help to rangers to randomize their patrols more effectively. As I mentioned, the parks have talked about, there's a lot of data, but places like this Royal Belem Park in Malaysia, only 800 observations, not enough to make all of those predictions. So now we want to collect data about illegal activity, but we want to balance exploration of collecting data and exploitation of using existing data. So balancing this exploration exploitation can be done using these bandit algorithms. That's another area of work. We've also been looking at use of drones. So we've built this system called Spot to automatically detect poachers and animals from drone imagery, which is infrared. And then this can be used in generating some kind of deceptive patrolling strategies so that when poachers show up, when we can detect them sometimes to deter them, even when rangers are not present, by giving them false signals, deceptive signals, by turning on the light of the drone and flying towards them, but not doing this truthfully only when rangers are nearby, also doing it when rangers are not nearby, and so forth. So these are some of the areas of future work that we are exploring in the area of this AI for wildlife conservation. So I'm going to end here and end with some of the lessons that we've learned, which I hope would be of some use to people interested in AI for social impact. As I said, achieving social impact and AI innovation go hand in hand. Partnerships with nonprofits, with governments and local communities is crucial when we talk about AI for social impact. We don't want to engage in helicopter science in AI for social impact. That is to say, go in there, get their data, write a paper, and run away. This was the first question I had when I went to Uganda to work with the Murchison Falls National Park, is that you are going to take our data, write a paper criticizing us, and run away, which had happened to them in the past. And I had to reassure them that, no, we're going to stay with you. We are going to deliver software. It is going to work. It is going to help you. And so it's something we have to be mindful of in this area. We have to be interested in the whole data to deployment pipeline. It's not just about improving algorithms and just writing papers about algorithmic improvements, but really being committed to the entire process. It's important to step out of the lab and into the field. It is important to embrace interdisciplinary research with our social work colleagues, with our conservation scientists. And finally, lack of data is a norm. It's a feature of AI for social impact. And it should be part of the project strategy. So with that, I'm going to end my lecture here. If you wanted to contact me, this is some of the ways you could connect with me. And thank you for listening to me. Really appreciate your patience. And I now look forward to any questions that you may have. Thank you. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
So Milind, thank you very much for an incredibly engaging and inspirational talk. I'm going to open. Yeah, I see the applause in the Zoom windows. I'm going to open the floor for questions now, and I'll invite people to raise their hands if they have questions that they'd like to ask. So I see we now have a question from the viewing room. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for this really fascinating talk. I wanted to go back to the Saheli development and ask you about the way that you decided on the features. That you said the social workers had collected data based on certain features. You also said some features were not going to be ones that could be collected. Could you just talk about that aspect of it a little bit?
Yes. So they collect information about, there's 43 features. They're all mentioned in our paper. They include age, income, education level, number of children. There's a lot of other information. They do not collect information about caste and religion, which would be, perhaps equivalent to what race might be in the United States as a way of looking at questions related to fairness towards underprivileged groups and so forth. And the reason, they have many reasons for not doing it. One of them is that they feel that, they don't have the auditory safety, as they were saying, and so that if this information is made public, there might be this more discrimination. And so they have not collected that. So in its stead, what we are looking at are income and education as two pieces of information on the basis of which we can make judgments about socioeconomic marginalization of people within these communities which are being serviced, and try to, according to Armand, try to service them more, to give them more help with these service calls. So that's what we have done. Now, there's more to be done in terms of explicitly ensuring that in the future, there's always more help given to those in the lower socioeconomic areas. That's being done automatically. I mean, it's sort of arising organically right now, just because the Saheli system picks them more to give service calls to. So I would agree that, in the future, maybe we put additional safeguards in the system to bias it more to achieve the goal of the nonprofit.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I actually have one for you, Milind, and it's more of a logistics question. You talked a lot about the data deployment pipeline, but when I think about how to actually, implement this bigger pipeline of actually engaging people, collecting a team, finding champions, getting the work funded, because of course travel and really creating relationships and community all takes time. Can you talk a little bit about that and how do we need a benefactor, or how do we get this to work? Yeah.
No, thank you for that very important question. And here I'll use this opportunity to advertise our program at Google for AI for Social Good. For anybody who's interested, we've run this program for 3 years and it will continue. We have an open call where faculty members can apply, because I understand the pain, Sheila, that you're pointing at. So I'm hoping that we can relieve some of that difficulty. So we have this AI for Social Good workshop programs. Faculty members, researchers can apply, NGOs apply, and then we do a matchmaking. We match every faculty member with 3 NGOs, each NGO with 3 faculty members. And then whoever does it's like speed dating, and then whoever has a match will write a proposal, and then we'll fund the proposal. And there's a pilot phase for 1 year. At the end of the pilot phase, if it's a good, if there's good progress and so forth that can be shown, then there's more funding that follows. And so so that's that's just one program that we have that tries to alleviate some of those difficulties, doesn't resolve everything, but at least hopefully alleviate some of the difficulties that you have mentioned. But I agree with you that this whole process is not very easy. When new faculty members, new researchers start out and they want to work in AI for social impact, it's not easy to find partners and so forth. Other things I have done is at our center here at Harvard, called nonprofits from Boston area, and done the same type of matchmaking on a smaller scale within Harvard. So those are some of the things that I have personally done to try to help people find the NGOs and provide a little bit of funding to get them started and so on. But in general, it really would be valuable if there's more of this that can be done on a some kind of a global scale. Maybe there's some kind of a partnership on AI that's more for AI for social good directly, that cuts across universities and tech companies and maybe nonprofits and so on. And that would be super helpful. And the other side of it that would also help is once we develop these solutions, to support them, because we develop a software, we are not going to charge a homeless shelter to apply this AI solution, or a wildlife conservation agency. So how do you support and maintain these solutions? Because you need software engineers and so forth. And so even on that side, it would be valuable if there's some kind of a larger organization at work that would keep supporting these solutions. And we don't have that right now. It's all kinds of kludgy solutions to try to continue the software to continue to work that we have. And so, yeah, I mean, if anybody has any thoughts, if people have some ideas on how to have this kind of a, so as I said, getting these solutions started, and then once the solutions are delivered, how to maintain them on both sides.
Yeah.
We need more solutions for scaling up this movement of AI for social good.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very comprehensive answer and extremely helpful, and also, yeah, motivating in terms of some things we might do. Just out of curiosity, since we do have a multidisciplinary group here with respect to the Google AI for social good effort, is it typically computer science faculty who are matched with NGOs or other organizations, or will I can imagine that some among our community, and you probably can imagine that from the types of questions you've been receiving, that may come with ideas or of things that they'd like to engage in and present sort of a third dimension to that matchmaking. Can you comment on that at all? Or?
Yes. So this time, for example, we had social work professors applying, and that's also fine, because they could work with a homeless youth organization or some other organization. And the other component that Google provides is also data scientists or people who will come into that partnership, and so they can do some of the work that can be done for data science, whatever, data engineering, etc. Also, there could be a three-way, there's a social work professor, there's an AI professor, and an NGO that get matched. So there's different ways in which we've been able to, so there have been conservation scientists and so forth who have also come through the program in this way.
Great. So everyone's welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, I see there's another question from the viewing room, so I'm going to cede the floor to them.
Hi, Professor Tambe. It's nice to see you again. So I had a question that, so throughout your work, you have used a variety of modeling techniques, from agent-based modeling to stack overlaying, SPON-TP, MTPs, bandits. And I often see that, like, when we talking about real problems, there are different, you can use either you have a lot of options, and you need to make this decision very early in the project. And sometimes those decisions have an impact, maybe 6 months, a year downstream. And I'm curious to know some of your insight on how you make that choice of what modeling technique to use when you make this such critical decisions that early.
No, it's an excellent question. And I guess one that doesn't receive as much attention and credit as perhaps it richly deserves, in terms of, in our AI papers, we'll often say there's a motivation, there's a model, and now let's come to the real interesting part, which is the algorithm to make the model run more efficiently, etc. But how did you choose why this was the right model is not often given the right kind of attention. And I mean, it's a lot of thought that goes into that, modeling and trying to understand why this is. And sometimes there's false starts. You start with some other approach and it just doesn't work. So I'll give you an example. This Saheli system that we built, we started out initially, if you look at the very first papers that we wrote, it's just a simple prediction system that we tried to build to say who's at risk of drop off, not knowing that would result in highlighting like 50% of the population is at risk of drop off. So that means, how can the NGO then choose the top 1,000 of them? That's their capacity to call. And so then we have to sort of go back to the drawing board and say, okay, there's something not quite working here. What can really deliver the solution that is really needed? And so often we have found sort of being in continuous, partnership with the nonprofit, sort of for every step of the 4-step process that I mentioned, where from the data to initial solution, go show them, and they'll say this doesn't work, and that allows us to refine. So that sort of deeper partnership has allowed us to maybe zoom in on the model a little sooner than perhaps would have been the case had we waited until the very end to deliver them a solution. And that's the way in which this model development has taken place. Hope that answers your question.
I saw, I don't, Faisal, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I saw that you made a remark. I don't know whether you wanted to elaborate upon why you had such a visceral reaction to this helicopter research. I think that's also a very good point. Maybe I'll just, yeah, sorry, Faisal. I'll just read what Faisal said, which was, yeah, thanks for mentioning helicopter research. It's a serious thing that you brought up, and I actually agree. It's and of course it's not just about AI that often first world nations will go in and try to do good for a period of time, but not stay. And I think that speaks to your point, Milind, about how we actually sustain these programs once we develop them and being able to continue to deliver on what we're doing. And also to serve that community, not to serve our purposes as researchers. Yeah, thank you. So I see there's another, oh, sorry, please.
No, go ahead, please go ahead, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I see there's another question from our viewing room.
Hi, Milind. It's great to see you, Jillian Hadfield, after talking about these things many years ago at USC. So I'm wondering where you think the AI for social good effort is, sort of in terms of how much are we doing of that work relative to what we could be doing? And I suspect it's a small number, but I'm interested in, I mean, I love your work, and particularly it's been a wonderful talk, sort of talking about very concretely, here are these spaces, we can sort of see what impact we can have in these very concrete, in these concrete ways. But if we think about AI development generally, right, so much of it is happening in the private technology companies and not in the public sector, and lots of challenges coming from that. So I'm wondering where you think we are on that, and anticipating that your answer is not very far, what you see as the big picture obstacles to having AI used as pervasively for social good questions as it is for commercial applications.
So wonderful to see you, Jillian, and thank you for that important question. So I'll start, I mean, there are many parts to the answer here, but let's start with the innovation part first, which is the research side of it. And I think early on, for sure, maybe there's more and more remedies now happening, and I'll speak to that. There's no place to act, the AI as a science is focused purely on methodological innovations, and the papers and everything, the conference, you can deliver a solution, and the comments from reviewers, all they'll say is there's no new algorithm here, even though you've done science in testing things in the field and shown that algorithm A is better than algorithm B, or whatever observations you've made. They'll just say there's no methodological contribution, paper is rejected. And this sort of instills fear in the minds of junior faculty members, researchers, because it means that you have to motivate, dedicate yourself to making these methodological innovations, even if there's no application of it. There's no thought about where it might be useful, and so on and so forth. So the first thing in terms of innovation, I would say that we should open up more of these spaces where interdisciplinary science can happen, with AI researchers and others coming together to deliver scientific solutions. This is real science happening. It's just not happening in pure AI methodological space. And I'm very glad that AAAI has this AI for Social Impact program now, which allows for some of these papers to be published. And now other conferences have started, like ICHCA and so forth, to follow. But many of the bigger AI conferences are still not there yet. And it would be nice if they open their doors to this type of research as well. NeurIPS, ICML, KDD, all of these conferences could hopefully encourage this kind of research. So that's I think on the innovation side. And I think then there is also education in terms of AI for social impact. I feel that, if we train all our, students only when we talk about teaching them AI, we just talk to them about, here's all the different AI techniques and tools, and here's how, but nothing about how to actually achieve impact in the field, how to work in an interdisciplinary fashion, how to conduct an experiment in the field. In public health, there is a whole implementation science. We just had a lecture on implementation science in my class today with an assistant professor of implementation science of public health. And where's the implementation science of AI for social impact? I mean, we don't have anything like that. So these types of things would help us in education and innovation. And then the third piece, as I said, is a more difficult piece perhaps, is sustenance of the solutions that we develop. Because, we have lots and lots of papers now in AI for social impact in the AAA. I mean, lots, relatively few compared to the total production of AI papers. But I can imagine that it's just difficult for people to sustain these solutions, to keep, how to maintain these solutions deployed in the field and so on. So if there's somehow a way of solving this, and earlier I had said, if somebody has any ideas, one of the ideas I've had is some kind of a nonprofit whereby, people could donate 20% of their time to this matchmaking place whereby people are available. And if somebody comes and says, I have this AI solution, but I don't know how to deploy this on the cloud. I don't know how to scale this up, that this person can come in and say, I can help you. And then somehow it gets maintained. So if there's some kind of a sort of a global marketplace of people who are willing to donate their time and people who have solutions, and there's some kind of matchmaking that could allow for AI for social impact to sustain itself on a larger scale, even if, or maybe there's some other solution. I assume there's more creative solutions for solving this problem.
Thanks, Milind. That's great, and that's I think the point about the academic incentives for faculty and publication outlets is a critical thing to think about. There's lots of talk in university about wanting translational science, impact science, challenge solving science, but we still haven't cracked the nut about how do you incentivize people who are now within these separate disciplines with highly spread, and so I think that's something we've been thinking through a lot here. The other piece I'm wondering about is in terms of problem identification, right? That sounds like something that needs to come from, your public health, your NGO, your conservation science, and so on. And I'm wondering if part of the solution is also how do we get more of those folks to know about and start to understand and imagine, I heard about the homeless peer study, or I heard about, and there's a familiar theme in a number of the ones you presented at any rate of you've got limited resources, you have to decide who to talk to first, where to look first, and so on. That's if we could educate our people in social work and public health, and I'm sure a lot of other things as well, to then know about that. So I'm wondering if there's any efforts, and you mentioned collaborating with social work. So are there efforts to kind of educate those folks and incentivize those folks on here as well?
That's an excellent thought, and that is definitely part of the solution here. And I personally haven't really thought about it too deeply about how to spread that information.
I see a future of collaboration here, Milind. This is great.
Awesome. Look
Wonderful.
forward to that. That is superb.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's understanding what the interventions can be and what sort of interventions can be made, how they can be maybe interventions that are already being made can be amplified, and how that's going to fit, whether it can fit into the work practice that exists right now for dealing with the issue that's trying to be resolved. And I think there are, these patterns of interventions that seem to work well. Well, that more than brings us to the close, and I wanted to thank you again, Milind, for a really fantastic and inspiring talk. And I think you've left us with a lot of things to think about, and then some things to work on as well. For those of you in our Schwartz Reisman community, I want to remind you that next week is reading week, so we will pause next week and not have a seminar, but please join us the week after that. We're having a special seminar featuring Katie Shilton of University of Maryland, who will be presenting Designing for Trust in Health Research with Pervasive Data. And that seminar, like this one, is going to start a little bit later because we're doing it jointly. So I look forward to seeing everybody again in 2 weeks, and please join me, and you can turn on your microphones if you like, and giving Milind a round of applause. Thank you again, Milind.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.